Hey there, Eli coming at you again from OSA Coventry here today with another episode of Ecology with Eli. Today I wanted to talk about a really interesting topic, one that is kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes, and that is the idea of convergent evolution. A lot of us understand at least some of the basic principles of evolution, natural selection, and that a lot of animals look the way they are just because of years and years and years of adaptations that happen slowly to allow them to undergo those changes. And most of these changes are beneficial to their survival, beneficial to them in some way, shape, or form. And that is why each animal behaves, looks, acts in the way it does, is because these adaptations are beneficial to its survival. The idea of convergent evolution brings in two animals or two organisms that might not be closely related and explains why they might look, behave, or act in a very similar manner. In this tank behind me here, I have a cute little dottyback. This is what they call a royal dottyback or a bicolor pseudochromis. And this, as the name suggests, is a species of dottyback. This comes from the family Pseudochromidae. And this family encompasses all of your dottybacks that we run across in the aquarium hobby. Now, this animal is from the Indo-Pacific. It does have quite an expansive range. However, it is only ever found in the Indian or Pacific Ocean. You guys might see this animal and think, wow, he looks very similar to a royal grama. And that would be correct. A royal grama is a species of basslet. He belongs to the family Grammatidae, and he is very similar in appearance to this here royal dottyback. These animals behave in a very similar way. They attain a very similar max size of about 3 or 4 inches, and it is very hard to distinguish them from each other from a distance, with both of them having that striking magenta purplish hue to their front half and a very vibrant yellow tail end. And these fish side by side can even be kind of difficult to tell apart, especially if you're kind of far away from the tank. Now, what would be the reason for these two animals looking so similarly, kind of behaving in very similar manners? They're both more of a reclusive, shy animal. They spend a lot of time in caves, they spend a lot of time in darker areas, and they are a little bit territorial about these areas in which they live in, and they achieve a very similar size, and it's really hard to ignore the fact that they look so similar. So a royal grama is actually an Atlantic species of basslet. So this animal is only ever going to be found in the wild in the Atlantic, in the Caribbean to be specific. And this animal never encounters the same waters that this royal dottyback would live in. Why, for that reason, would they still have very similar coloration and very similar behavior? So obviously there must be some sort of advantage for these animals to behave similarly. One of the leading theories with coloration of a lot of your reef fishes is mostly to be more recognizable and to serve some sort of purpose as to communication between animals of the same species. So this striking contrast between purple and yellow is very recognizable. It's something that catches your eye from across the way. And this might be a way that this animal, whether it is the royal dottyback or the royal grama, is communicating with its fellow of the same species and kind of alerting to them that there is another one of their kind in the area. It is very hard to ignore that contrast. It is something that from a very large distance you should be able to pick up. And that is quite a convincing reason for them to have such a contrasting color. In addition, with them being more of like a cave or a den living species, this may help to serve as a form of camouflage. From the front end with their heads sticking out of the cave, most of the time you're only going to see that purplish hue. And from outside of that area, especially considering these are more dimly lit areas, that purple might blend completely into the rockwork. It might be a lot harder for an animal on the outside of that cave to notice those colors, just because it blends in at such deep depths and blends into the color of that rockwork. However, from the tail end, obviously this is a drastic color difference, and this animal's tail is a very bright color, and that might help to signal this animal from behind. So whether that is to signal to others of the same species that yes, I am present, or if it is to signal other animals to kind of make them aware that there is another animal at the front of that cave, and that maybe that's something that they do not want to come across. It might be bright for that reason, to just alert the other animals that there is something present. But one of my favorite facts about these animals, something that drives me absolutely mad, is that these animals never encounter each other in the wild. So separately, on different occasions, these two lineages, these two families of animals, separately selected for almost an identical appearance of these two animals, which I just think is really interesting, really confusing, hard to wrap your head around, but really proves that there is some sort of advantage to that color pattern, to that body shape, and to that behavior in the wild. And this implies that there are some sort of factors that in two separate lineages of fishes have perfectly allowed for this behavior, for this coloration, and for this body plan to be beneficial in two very different settings. Now, there are many other examples of convergent evolution. There are some examples. One of my personal favorite is to see a fish like a scissortail rasbora or a rummy-nosed tetra that has a very fusiform or a tube-like body plan, silver sides, and a barred tail. You see this on a few different species of freshwater fish. Scissortail rasboras are a great example. The rummy-nosed tetras are a great example. They look very similar to one another, whereas the rummy-nose does have that red nose. The rest of their body plan and their coloration is very similar to that species of rasbora, which comes from a drastically different locale than the tetras do. The rummy-nosed tetras are going to come from Amazon River Basin down in South America, whereas those rasboras come from areas in Asia. In addition, there are also saltwater fish that have a very similar body plan, very similar coloration. There are flagtail moharas or barred flagtails, which is a very similar shaped fish, another fusiform tube-shaped fish, very silvery flanks, and a tail that has bars of white and black. And that really suggests that there is some sort of benefit to these animals having that sort of coloration. They are all schooling animals, so that silver side appearance is going to help them all blend into each other. And perhaps that's the same theory with that tail, or maybe there's another benefit that helps to camouflage them by looking so similarly. Slim to no chance that these animals will ever come across each other in the wild, so it's really interesting to see that they look so strikingly similar. And as far as genomics have come into play in ecology in recent years, as genome sequencing has become a little more available, a little more mainstream for the purpose of science, exploration into different species of crabs has led to the realization that the general body plan of a crab, of a decapod crustacean, has been selected for evolutionarily many times. So there is possibly single common ancestors for a lot of your different species of crabs, whether you're looking at things like spidered crabs or platunid swimming crabs or any of your other types of crabs. There is a very good chance that they came from a common ancestor that did not even resemble crabs. So there was separate events in which these two lineages, or even more so in the case of crabs, have actually selected for a body plan with that really flattened, wide carapace and 10 legs on either side. So it's really interesting to kind of take that into account. With the genome sequencing, you were really able to positively identify these as different lineages, as different clades of animals. And it's really interesting to see that something that you might take for granted just as the general body plan of a crab. You might consider all crabs to be crabs, but they might be a lot further related from each other than you might expect. Overall, the theory of convergent evolution really does go to show that there are benefits to the way an animal behaves, to a way that that animal appears. And there may be so many factors that we are taking for granted that allow for these animals to adapt and to become their own strict species over evolutionary time periods. That's one of the things that I think is so interesting, especially about the reef environment, is that there are so many different unique types of animals and they all serve their own niches, and there is so many examples of convergent evolution, things that you might take for granted but allow these animals that are really not closely related to look so similar and to act so similar. As always, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Ecology with Eli. I hope that you found this topic really interesting. One of my favorite concepts of evolution, concepts of ecology, and just something that is really hard but interesting to wrap your head around. As always, please feel free to leave comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below. And as always, keep on reefing.